Hi guys, welcome back to another edition of Cam Talks Firearms Reviews. Uh, I was feeling a little film noir today, so I decided I'd try to dress up. I know I'm lacking the fedora for a classic private detective, but it's going to be okay because I've got what every other private detective needs besides a hunch and a cold case, his trusty six gun. Uh, this is, as promised, the Smith & Wesson Model 15 38 caliber revolver. Uh, these were designed in, say, they've been around for more than 100 years now. This particular model came out in the 50s, late 50s. 57 was the first year that the Model 15 came out. Before that, it was called the M&P or Military Police model because it was marketed, as you would expect, to the military. I saw quite a bit of use there as the Smith & Wesson Victory revolver, which you can get World War I, World War II editions. Usually the finish is a little different, or the classic cop gun, classic cop six-shooter. And there aren't many departments still using them, but I think like this year is the last year that the last seven New York Police Department officers uh, were allowed to have their revolvers. So again, this one, as with pretty much every Smith & Wesson handgun you're going to find made after the turn of last century, is a double action handgun. What that means is when you pull this trigger, you can do two things. First, I'll show you the gun is empty. But so revolvers work two ways basically. When you cock the hammer back, it turns this cylinder. It would bring up a fresh cartridge up in line with the barrel. And the trigger drops the hammer. It goes bang. Like the classic cowboy guns. They're called single action because you have to do this, and you have to do this and this and this. And they got pretty fast at doing it. But a double action is in a lot of ways faster because all you have to do is squeeze that trigger. It's a little bit heavier because you're doing so many more things mechanically with just your trigger finger. But it tends to be a little bit faster because all you have to do is keep your finger on the trigger and shoot. These can also be, as you saw, cocked, and you have a very, very small, very light trigger pull. So it makes it very accurate. I love shooting this handgun. These are set up, the Model 15s, with adjustable sights on them. Not like you really need to be adjusting the sights on a handgun like this, but with where it is currently set up, I can hit a small target, like a 4 to 6 inch steel plate at 50 yards, which if you think about this little bitty Dirty Harry wannabe revolver, that's pretty impressive. At least I think it is. There are plenty of people out there who would do better than that. But this was actually one of my first firearms that I purchased. It was the first center fire. I had a shotgun, the 22, and I had $300 of overtime money, and I found this. A gentleman was selling it. That fellow named Kenny, who was actually on the Marine Corps shooting team, and this was his favorite pistol. His buddy had the same one. His buddy fell in hard times, so he bought that one to help him out, and he sold me this one. And that was a couple of years ago. Most of these guns in their older design like this can be found for $400 to $500 on the used market. They are still being made. Smith & Wesson reintroduced these about 10 years ago now as kind of their legacy gun. So you can still get these, and they are gorgeous, blued steel. This one's a little worn, being that it's 50 years old. It's had quite a bit of use, quite a bit of rounds shot through it. So the bluing is not quite as pretty as it used to be, but it's still nice and shiny, and it looks really good. And these are target grips that were put on there. These are Smith & Wesson. They actually have a little symbol right there. See, it matches. So what the target grips do is they fit your hand better. The regular grips are a lot smaller than this. Pretty much if you could follow the outline that's grounded right there. So it's a lot smaller, it's easier to conceal on your person, but it doesn't give you as good a grip as the larger target grips do. Go figure. The Smith & Wessons, I personally feel, have some of the best trigger pulls in the revolver market. You can upgrade these. You can have a Gunsmith Light in your trigger pull so that this can be even smoother, but it is a very, very nice trigger pull. It's a long trigger pull, and I really like using these firearms to show new shooters kind of how to focus, how to shoot, because there's a very, very long, steady, slow trigger pull. So you can focus on those sights and just keep drawing and drawing and drawing, and then the gun goes bang. This is chambered in 38 Special, which I did have out here, but I think it's rolled off the table and I'm not going to duck down and get it. 38 Special is a 38 caliber bullet. So it's about the same size as a 9mm as far as the projectile is concerned. It is a little bit larger, but they're usually not loaded to quite the same powder capacity, velocity, because these guns, as you can see, there's different moving parts to them as opposed to my Glock, which you saw was a pretty compact, pretty solid little piece. If you put too much pressure on revolvers, because there are so many moving pieces, you run the risk of bending the metals, potentially blowing up the firearm. I mean, you'd have to do some really crazy stuff to end up looking like Elmer Fudd, but it can happen. So as always, make sure that whenever you're shooting firearms, you're matching the bullet to the manufacturer's recommendation for the gun. You don't want to be shooting super duper high speed, powerful loads through a revolver like this. They might be good in a lever action rifle, but because these are such lightweight, thin steel revolvers, really not something you want to do to them. It's a beautiful example of craftsmanship over the past century, and I would prefer not to destroy it with my own curiosity. Yes, the classic double action revolver is that perfect scene, either from Dirty Harry or Deer Hunter, depending on who you're talking to, of did I fire 5 shots or 6? One thing I actually like to do, so if you go shooting with me, it may happen to you, because you can't see which chamber has a bullet in it, is I will actually load some of them with spent empty cartridges so that you're not jumping from the recoil. You can focus on, like I said, pulling the trigger, which I think aids in your accuracy. I am a huge revolver fan, though I don't have a lot of them. I recommend someone own a revolver as a firearm. A lot of people recommend them as home defense firearms because they're simple to operate. There's no external safety on this firearm. It's just the trigger. So you do need to exercise caution with that. But you can load a variety of different cartridges into this and not worry about the function of it. They make rat shot or snake shot, which is basically a little shotgun shell for a revolver. There's some defense loads, there's target loads, there's all sorts of things that you can put in this gun to shoot inexpensively at the range, to defend yourself with. This is a relatively large gun to try to conceal. I have done it, but I probably wouldn't recommend it. If you can compare this to the size of my Glock, it's pretty beefy, it's pretty wide, as you can see, pretty long. Really, real fun to shoot, but they're also a little bit slower to reload, if you can think about it, because you have to either manually put 6 bullets into the gun, or you get a speed loader, which basically is a claw and it holds 6, and it fits perfectly into that cylinder, and you twist it off and drop it in your pocket or throw it at the perpetrator, whatever you need to do with it. But they tend to be a little slower to reload as well. Usually fewer malfunctions with them because there's no magazine to jam. There's nothing to really jam in this revolver. So I didn't have quite as much interesting facts on these, kind of just because they are a classic ubiquitous revolver. The Air Force actually used these till about the 90s as their standard service pistol. And said most police forces up until the late 80s, early 90s, when it became apparent that these high-profile shootouts, the North LA bank robbery, the Miami shootout, in which officers were carrying revolvers and were totally outgunned by bad guys with rifles. They decided to up to carry the Glock and things like that. So you get that difference in like Lethal Weapon. You got Mel Gibson with a Beretta, and then you got a 4-inch Smith. As far as class is concerned, as far as the enjoyment of shooting, I would recommend that everyone, if you have an opportunity, find a Smith & Wesson revolver to shoot. Don't recommend shooting the snub-nose little carry guns because they are loud and they recoil quite a bit because you're firing the same bullet in a gun that weighs half this much. These big, beefy Cadillac-style guns like this are just the bee's knees. So this is going to be staying in my collection and probably on my hip for a good long time. And I'm going to be wearing it around the house while I wear this outfit. I wish it was raining outside. That'd be even so much more detective-like, but oh well. Thank you guys for tuning in. I promise next week I'll come up with something different. If you have any questions, want to see something, want to hear something, send me a message and let me know. Thank you guys. See you next time. And my goodness, the computer